it's been 2 weeks, barely 2 weeks since the Ghana's elections took place, parliamentary elections and presidential elections. Very soon, the existing parliament will be dissolved, and then will come a new parliament. I am told that is a sixth parliament of the Fourth Republic. Will be sworn in a new set of parliamentarians and possibly a new Speaker of Parliament. Tonight we'll be assessing the role of the Speaker of Parliament in the fifth or sixth Parliament. We'll get a clarification of which of them is supposed to be the name or the correct reference of this Parliament. Now, what we've heard, and Joy News has been gleaning sets of information that already there are names being mentioned as possible speakers, which suggests that the only female Speaker of Parliament in the history of Ghana since 1951, Justice Joyce Bamford Addo, could possibly be bowing out. Now, former Attorney General and seasoned diplomat Dr. Obed Yao Asamoah has been named First Deputy Speaker of Parliament Edward Kobbly Do Ajaho and former Deputy Speaker Kenneth Jirasa have also been mentioned. Nobody knows which of these gentlemen will be sworn in as the next Speaker of Parliament. Tonight we'll be assessing basically the role of the Speaker of Parliament, what they do, and then we will also narrow down on assessing how Joyce Bamford Addo did her job as Speaker of Parliament, as analysts claim that she didn't really do much, as most of the very critical decisions in the House were taken when Do Ajaho was sitting in her stead. Tonight I have with me in the studio Dr. Clement Apak, who is convener for the Forum for Governance and Justice, and then later on we'll get onto the phone lines to speak to Dr. Arthur Kennedy, who is a leading member of the MPP and a medical doctor with the University of Cape Coast Medical School. Welcome, sir, to PM Express. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And we were, before we came on air, recalculating possibly whether this parliament will be fifth Parliament or sixth Parliament, and by the calculation you suggested that it could actually be the sixth, because it does appear that the term of the President is coterminous with that of the Speaker. How would you assess the last Parliament so far in your capacity as a governance person?
Well, I think that it is very important that we indicate that per our Constitution, we have what we call three arms of our governance structure. Of course, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Whereas the executive and the legislature usually are formed based on the outcome of an election, the judiciary certainly is not. I mean, sort of is the, if you like, the vanguard and the component of the system that ensures that we all behave according to the laws of the land, including the executive and the legislature. Now, I think that we must also put into context the fact that almost every 4 years, regardless of whether a government is retained or not, the Constitution requires for the previous parliament to be dissolved and then a new parliament sworn in. It is a case that some members run for re-election and they get sworn in again. But it is also the case that others don't win, or they just simply decide that they've had enough and then they move on. So quite clearly, the point I'm trying to make is that Parliament has and would continue to play a very important role, likely because if and when there are some conditions that perhaps would cause the executive not to be able to perform to its optimum, or even in the case where there are occurrences that would, for example, disrupt our governance structure, it is Parliament that has the responsibility of stepping in and then applying the right laws to ensure that the system runs. And we all know what happened when the late former president, Professor Mills passed, and we all agreed that Parliament played a very crucial role in rallying and bringing the nation together, and then offering a basis for a very peaceful transition. So Parliament plays a very important role. The argument has always been whether by the very design of our system and the fact that more or less the winning party, which has won the presidency so far, has always tended to also have a majority in Parliament, even if slim, and where it is not that much, then of course they are able to negotiate some types of agreements with smaller parties in Parliament, and then to bring them on board. So people have tended to question whether Parliament has been able to be on its own and to hold the executive duly accountable. And my argument is yes. I mean, it is not about being at loggerheads. It is about finding ways to ensure that government business and the people's interest is served by debating policy proposals, looking at budgets, and then coming to a compromise. And that is why even if you look at the nature of our Parliament so far, I mean, I'm talking about from the very start of the first Parliament of the Fourth Republic up to today, both sides of the aisle have always found ways to work together as a team. So my own assessment is that this Parliament has done well, but our system is fairly new, 20 years, slightly above. It's not a long time. So as we are continuously growing and we are learning, and more people are taking an interest in serving as legislators, coming from various backgrounds with pools of knowledge that reflect the diversity of our population, it is only going to improve, just like the whole system is improving. So my own assessment is that the Parliament that is going to be dissolved has performed, even if it is how it's subintended over some of the very controversial...
If you were to rate, would you hazard a rate, say 1 to 10, this past Parliament? You think they've done incredibly well, or very well, extremely well?
Well, I would say probably I'll give them 7 out of 10. And I say so because you must remember that the difference between the majority and the minority side, particularly for the outgoing Parliament,
is very small.
Was very small.
Like 9.
And yet they were able to get a lot of important work done. You understand? And if you look at even the way that the honorable members of the House handled the passing of our late president, that in itself, I thought, was very remarkable. And of course, we all received global acclaim and praise for how seamless the transitional process occurred. And that was largely because the Parliament was up and doing, and so there were no delays. And of course, they were able to work with the judiciary and of course the executive, and we had a very smooth.
So are there any down moments for you that you recall Parliament didn't do exactly a spot-on job?
Well, I think most of the complaints about Parliament are complaints that are known to most Ghanaians, although I've tended to feel that if you look at the 3 arms of our governance structure, they have, it looks like Parliament has sort of become the component that everybody likes to beat on, so to speak. The issue of attendance, I thought, was one that was repeatedly highlighted, to the extent that even the Speaker of Parliament severally had to admonish members of the August House to be punctual and to make sure that they act in ways that would not cause people to begin to question their commitment. And I know that there are a lot of other intervening reasons why some of them were not there. For example, going to visit with your constituents, going on external trips to represent the nation state, committee meetings. So there were reasons. And of course, we can't also forget the logistical challenges. Most of them, up till now, that we are beginning to see the completion of Job 600, they didn't have offices. So some people actually had to leave the premises of Parliament House to go and have meetings with their constituents who come to them from across the country. And coming from the north, where, the distance between there and here, and people traveling all the way from our constituency of Bulsa South or Bulsa North or, Bunkrugu to come and visit or to discuss matters, pressing matters with your MP. I mean, your MP has no office, no space, no assistant. Your MP then has to arrange to meet you somewhere else, and all of this takes them away. So, you know, with all of these improvements that we are seeing in terms of even the logistical support, offices and probably staff and a small research team, certainly the next parliament is going to have a lot more advantages, and their work is not going to be that cumbersome. It would also reduce the tendency
and expectations will be high of members of the next parliament.
Of course, but I mean, what excuse are you going to give? You would have an office very close to where you sit, and you would have a research team, so you should know what is going to come into the House. And so I think that we should have a much more higher expectation of the coming parliament.
Well, my name is Stephen Anti, and you're watching PM Express. I'm here in the studio with Dr. Clement Apaka, and we have on the line Dr. Arthur Kennedy, a leading member of the MPP. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us on PM Express.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Now, I know a few weeks from now, a new parliament will be sworn in, despite the fact that the MPP is still preparing to go to court to contest the outcome of the 2012 general elections. As it stands, the status quo is that we will expect that a new parliament will be sworn in and the president will also be sworn in. Now, I need to ask you, you have witnessed the terms of Right Honorable Ebenezer Sechi Hughes and Peter Lajete, for example. If you compare the work they did as speakers of parliament to that of Joyce Bamford Addo, how would you rate her?
Well, to be fair, I need to confess that I wasn't in parliament, so I judged them from afar. But having said that, based on what people tell me, it will appear that the best speaker of this republic has been Mr. Alajiti. People have uniformly commended him for strength in the chair, clarity of purpose, and generally being able to keep the business of the House running. I think that Mrs. Addo did a good job, but she had difficult times. I remember there was an occasion when she walked out of the chair, and there have been a few occasions when she has complained that she wasn't being shown respect. So those things maybe can be taken as evidence that she struggled a little bit in the chair.
And then, so being a woman and the first woman to be a Speaker of Parliament, did that make any difference to you from where you stand?
Not really. I have lived in North America where people look at competence without reference to gender. So in my view, it is about competence and being able to do the job. And if you can do it, it should not matter what your gender is.
There are also two schools of thought. One that she endeared herself very well to Parliament. And then there's the other school of thought that also said that she usually chickened out when there were tough deliberations to be taken care of in the House, to let Do Ajaho take charge of those. Is this something you will remember her for?
Well, like I said, it's a little difficult to judge her from afar, and maybe sometimes from a distance we only see the controversies and the downside, like the time she complained she wasn't being shown respect and she walked out of the chair. And it might also be that during those times when somebody else took over, since this is a very political office, maybe somebody made a decision that it would be better for somebody else to be in the chair rather than her. And those things maybe have more to do with other people's views about her and how she views herself.
So if you were asked, you know, as a neutral observer, somebody who is not in Parliament, you were asked whether you feel that Justice Bamford Addo should be bowing out, would you support that?
It depends upon what the alternatives are. You know, I don't think you should get somebody against nobody. So we need to know what the other options are out there. I'm sure that some of those out there might be better and some too might maybe be worse.
Right. Obeda Samoa, for example, has been mentioned, and Do Ajao himself has also been mentioned, as well as Ken Jirasa. These are very well achieved former parliamentarians in their own right. You don't think any of them will fit the bill?
So I think they all look like reasonable choices, particularly given their experience in Parliament. You know, I think that maybe they would not struggle before, you know, getting the rhythms and rhymes of the House. So they will be reasonable choices, but of course, you will be judging them against Ms. Ado, who has actually held the position before. So talking about experience, I think that she can argue reasonably that she now has experience in the job.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Arthur Kennedy. We'll still have you hold, and later on in the discussion, we'll come back to you if we need to speak to you some more. Thank you very much. So, Dr. Park, I was trying to put the whole discussion in the context of the Article 95 of the Constitution, Section 1, which makes provision for the Speaker of Parliament to be elected.
That's correct.
Now, Bamford Ado has gone through that mill, and now it does appear that she might bow out. I'm not very certain. Nobody is certain. But would you say that it's time for her to bow out?
Well, even before I get there, you know, the previous question that you had asked was to identify some of the low moments. And, I had talked about the issue of absenteeism and punctuality. But the other issue that I wanted to raise, which I think most people agree was a bit distasteful, was when members of the opposition decided to show the late president a red card. And I thought that that was a bit distasteful. So certainly, I thought that that was a low moment. But they have the right to do so. But I just didn't feel that
I mean, what could she have done? What could she have done? I mean,
but anyway, let's go to your substantive question. It is difficult to tell. Obviously, she is somebody who is qualified. She has served in that role. And as my senior, fellow old vandal, Dr. Arthur Kennedy, indicated, you know, she has gained experience. And so for all intents and purposes, for the moment, we can say that she is the most experienced candidate for that position. But whether she would continue or not, we don't know. And a lot of factors would come into play. One would be,
factors like,
well, her own. I mean, you know, people do work, they get tired of it, or they feel that they have achieved the purpose for which they took up their responsibility. A lot of other factors could mitigate against her, even putting herself forward. And of course, you know, these are also political, these are positions that have political implications. So it could also be possible that the changes that we are seeing in the system could also impact whether she's going to stay or not. Either way, we wouldn't know until perhaps the names begin to firm up, because by the processes, the new parliament is only able to conduct one business before any other business, which is the election of the speaker. So sooner or later, we are going to have to find out who the options are. And the way these things are done, obviously the president is going to have a say.
That definitely should be done before January 6th.
Oh yes, right? Most definitely. I mean, you know, let's face it. You know, a lot of the time, those of us on the outside, we see Parliament as some place where you have two groups just going at it. No. In fact, they work together in a very mutual and pleasant way. Those of us who are friends there on either side, you go there and you find them chatting and eating and then walking hand in hand. So those conversations are going to start, and I think this is why we are probably hearing names. It is not bad. What it shows is that at least the majority side, which is also the party in power today, obviously has won the most seats, and they've won the presidency, given what we know, and as per the declaration by the recognized authority. They are going to have to work out, you know, through the president's prerogative, because obviously the way our system is structured now, Parliament and the majority focus largely on getting the people's work done, but they also push government business in the House. So having a speaker who understands the workings of Parliament, has the right attitude in being able to galvanize the support and garner the respect of both majority and minority, with the ability to intervene, to calm down, you know, and even defend the image of Parliament, you know. And of course, understanding the laws of the land is very important. But it is by
so
virtue of
understanding the laws
Constitution.
of the land, does it mean that a speaker must necessarily be a lawyer?
No.
But
No.
all the speakers in Ghana that
Well,
since 1951 have all been lawyers.
Well, it is the case that perhaps by default, and probably because we believe that, you know, these are persons who should be able to properly understand and interpret the laws of the land, we have sort of seeded it by default. Probably not. I don't think that it was a conscious design.
Right.
That
And so for the
benefit
benefit of our viewers, we'll walk you through some of those who have been speakers of Parliament since 1951. Now, in March 1951 to December 1957, the Speaker of Parliament was Sir Emmanuel Charles Quist. And then in February of 1958 to June of 1960, the Speaker of Parliament was Honorable Justice Augustus Molade Akiwumi. Sounds very Nigerian.
Yes,
I'm not sure whether he was. And then in July 1960 to June 1965, Honorable Richard Esiedu was the Speaker, and Honorable Kofi Asante Oforiatta was Speaker on 10th June 1965 to 2nd February 1966. And then came Justice Ni Ama Olenu, 1969 to December 1971. And then Justice Hackenberg Griffiths Reindorf. That's some very English name there. He was Speaker 24th September 1979 to 31st December of 1981. Then came Honorable Justice Daniel Francis Annan, who was Speaker late Justice Annan, January 1993 to January 6th, 2001. Then Peter Alajete was Speaker between 2001, 7th January to 6th January 2005, followed by Ebenezer Benyina Sechi Hughes, who left office in January 6th, 2009, before Justice Bamford Addo came. So it does appear all these gentlemen and lady are lawyers.
Yes.
Are there any constitutional provision that require that a speaker must have deeper or thorough knowledge of the applications of law than the ordinary person?
Well, not necessarily. As far as the Constitution is concerned, it does not designate the basic requirements are the same that you are to have. You cannot qualify to be the Speaker if you do not qualify to become a member of Parliament. You know, so it's just the basic criteria.
You must be of sound mind.
Exactly.
You must be 18 and above.
18 and above. You shouldn't have a criminal record. But there are other indications
you must
that
not have
true.
dual citizenship and all the prescriptions in the
Exactly.
Constitution.
But there are other factors that go into that. For example, given the role that you play, knowing fully well that in terms of the hierarchy of the system, you actually get to be president if and when the president and the vice president are both out of the country. So it also would require somebody who has the right attitude, you know, has a very high moral standard, a person of integrity, somebody who commands respect in society generally, so that, you know, you are to some level beyond reproach. So it is a very important responsibility. But I think that given who we are, we tend to be very reasonable people. And in spite of all our flaws, you know, every society, we have the ideal situation, we have our values, but we are also humans, and therefore we have flaws. But even so, we recognize that some people, perhaps in some professions, have a better attitude for certain types of responsibilities. And therefore, by default, we tend to sort of think that they will do a better job. That is not to say that if we were to try somebody outside of the legal fraternity, that person will not excel as a member of Parliament. And I think that in our lifetime, it is likely to change. But if it is serving us well so far, then it is likely that the trend is going to continue. And I see that already happening, because if you look at the names that you mentioned,
yeah,
you can see that they are all from the legal fraternity. They are all lawyers by training. So it looks like, at least for the coming parliament, the trend is going to continue. And I don't think that it is necessarily a bad thing. But as our democracy is growing, and as the Fourth Republic is gaining more in terms of its longevity, I think that sooner or later there will be people that we can tap to become speakers, probably through their experience in Parliament itself. Because, I mean, if you look at some of those that you mentioned, even the current Speaker of Parliament, she wasn't a member of Parliament, which is part of the requirement. You could be Speaker of Parliament, for example, if you meet the criteria and the President proposes you, or his party proposes you, and there is some agreement between the majority and the minority, and they think that you have what it takes to do the job. You know, you don't have to be a lawyer.
So of the names that have come up, if I asked you to maybe make a prediction or projection, which of these names you think could make it? Who would you? Well,
it's a very difficult question. First of all, they all have the same legal backgrounds, which sort of puts them on the same pedestal. Now, and they've all served as members of Parliament as well. Yeah. You know, and they've all acquitted themselves as far as their personal achievements are concerned.
And Obada Samoa has been Minister of
Justice. He has been Minister
for the longest in the history of Ghana.
You know, Attorney General and Minister for Justice. He's been Foreign Affairs Minister. He's been party chairman. So obviously he has the right background.
But there is also that friction between himself and former President Rawlings, which led to him splitting from the NDC and returning. He's seen as the returnee. Is this important in determining who becomes Speaker of Parliament, seeing that a Speaker must be seen to be neutral?
Well, that is a point, but I don't know whether that's going to affect him. I don't know. Because we are allowed to disagree with people. I mean, it is not a crime that he disagreed. But that would, at the end of the day, the president is going to have a say in who becomes speaker. Likely, the list will be narrowed down to 2 people. Those 2 persons will be proposed. There will be backdoor conversations and negotiations between the majority side and the minority side. They will settle on one. They will come out. They will vote.
But you wouldn't say you think it could be this.
Well, the point is that they are all good. I mean, we spoke about Dr. Obada Samoa. Certainly he qualified. Kenjirasa too was a member of Parliament. He's a known lawyer. He has served his country very well in multiple capacities. I got to know him when I was a kid in Wa, where he was then a practicing lawyer in those days, just soon after the Upper West became a region under Jerry Rawlings. This was even before, you know, we got back to the Fourth Republic, and he became a deputy speaker as well. Is that not so?
It is, yeah.
And then we have the current deputy speaker, Doajaho, who is also a lawyer
and a member of Parliament,
a fine gentleman who is currently a member of Parliament, has played an active role, as you even indicated in your conversations with Arthur Kennedy, where the suggestion is that where there were difficult issues or proposals, you know, he was in charge. So he is actually currently playing a role in that capacity.
Doajaho has been seen as a stronger head than Justice Bamford Addo. So when critical debates like CI, the debate of the CI, which became very heated in Parliament, he was in charge. And I sat in the session where the last decision was taken to pass the CI into law, and you know, his demeanor is a no-nonsense person and has the ability to more like bully his way through. Is that the kind of leader we need for a Speaker of Parliament?
You see, Parliament, I mean, like every institution, when you bring that many people together, they come from all backgrounds. There are different attitudes. So you definitely need somebody. That's why you need a speaker who can command the respect of all. Be able to apply the rules evenly, be fair, but also assertive.
And be fair.
And that is very important. And I think that, you know, he has been very fair. I have seen him preside over you know, a few sessions that I felt that he was fair. Let me give you an example. I am in court currently, suing 3 independent members of parliament who decided to join the MPP. And that issue actually was something that came to the floor of parliament. It was raised by the Honorable Inusa Fuseni. And Joe Doajaho was sitting. And he actually refused to grant what Inusa Fuseni was seeking on the basis that the information that was being presented was largely from the media and press, and that he would only act if Inusa Fuseni was able to furnish him with information that, for example, came from the Electoral Commission. So that is how fair he was. Although I had a problem, I thought that, I mean, Article 97H was very clear that as an independent member of parliament, if you joined a party, you should lose your seat. So I thought it was a clear-cut case, but he didn't see it that way. So definitely, being strong and firm and being able to exact your role and your influence as a speaker is what allows. I mean, you encourage debate, all right, but you must know where to put your foot down and to bring the house to order. Because Parliament has a lot of value for our society. It allows the people to have an avenue to go and seek redress directly. And that in itself is a benefit for our democracy. Rather than blaming the judiciary, which I have done on several occasions, I've never said that, you know, the entire judiciary is corrupt. I've had issues here and there. And of course, people have issues with the functionality of the executive sometimes. But once they know that they have their representatives in Parliament, the People's Assembly, they can go there and vent and complain, and you know, their MPs will take these issues on, sometimes very controversial. And that is why it is always good to have a speaker who not only understands the law and understands the standing orders, but also understands the functionality and the multiplicity and generality of our society. It is very, very, very important. And I think all of these are going to factor into the next.
Yes. My name is Stephen Anti, and you heard Dr. Clement Apart. We're still assessing the role of the Speaker of Parliament, and we're talking through what the new Parliament is likely to look like. Now, in the new Parliament, I'll give you an idea. Someone like Titus Glover is in there, and Fifi Kwete is also going, as well as Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa. Dr. Park, these names, you expect them to stir Parliament up in very heated debates, or you expect that they will tone down and be perhaps diplomatic and sassy?
Well, it would depend. You see, I think the way Parliament functions, the leadership would assess the members on their side of the aisle, and then, of course, they will begin to assign them responsibilities. Some may be backbenchers. So depending on the decisions that the leadership would make, the issues that are going to come up, then both the minority and majority side would then decide who are going to be their front bench and who the backbenchers are going to be. But I must say that Ghanaians should be very excited about the coming parliament, largely because our population dynamics are finally beginning to manifest themselves in a much more overt way, to the extent that there's going to be a lot members of parliament who are below 45 years old. And I'm not saying all of them.
And there are 45 new ones.
Exactly, that they are going to be there. So as you mentioned, you know, you have the likes of Fifi Kwete, Samuel Okujato, Titus Glover, Baba Jamal, Hannah Bisu, Hannah Tete. What this Dome Kwabenya, what's his name? Ajua Safo. So it's going to be very vibrant, and I am excited because they are going to be a true reflection of our population dynamics. If you look at the recent census, it's quite clear that we are a generally youthful population, so that they'll be able to bring the issues affecting us to bear in a way that, you know, a lot of the older generation would not be able to appreciate. I mean, my father has mates who are still in parliament, and he's retired. But the issues that my father faced when he was my age are not the same. Yeah. You know, when they were in university, for example, everything was essentially free. They even went on protest because they were eating too much chicken or that they were having too much wine. We have those kinds of luxuries. So times are changing, and you're having this new crop of youthful politicians there. There's going to be vigorous debate. But debate is good. And that is going to allow us to get the best. Because a vigorous debate always brings about something positive. Even when you disagree, you would find submissions made by your opponent that can be useful towards the discussion.
I wonder whether Dr. Arthur Kennedy is still online to speak with him on his expectations. No, I'm told he's not there. Anyway, we might have... He's still there, yes. Dr. Kennedy, if you're there and you're hearing me, now we're talking about the new phase of Parliament. I know the gap between the NDC and the MPP as it stands now is roughly about 30. But also there have been very new faces like a Blackwell, Titus Glover, MPP's own Adjoa Safo. What do you foresee the next Parliament to look like when it comes to debating and things like that?
Well, it is difficult to predict. I think that it is sure exciting that a lot of new faces are coming in. However, as my colleague pointed out, Parliament has its own ethos and how it functions. So these people will have to join their caucuses and then make their own way and reputation. There are people who have very good reputations among the public, but when you talk to parliamentarians, their work rate in committees are not very respected. So they will have to, in effect, earn respect. And as an American parliamentarian or a British parliamentarian once said, you know, your first term, you are just supposed to be seen and not heard much. So while you are not heard much, then you are building bridges so that later on you can become an effective parliamentarian. So sometimes being too outspoken up front might not be the best strategy to take if you have long-term views of rising to leadership. The other thing that bothers me, despite the general excitement, is the overwhelming majority of the NDP as it stands. Generally, when parliaments are closely divided, they tend to, in effect, more compromise. When one party thinks that they can, in effect, have its way all the time, there isn't that much consultation with other parties. So, from that point of view, I think that it would have been better if it was a little closer.
So you're not... yeah.
Not pardon me.
But you're not... So it means you're not very optimistic of this parliament as a result of the gap, right?
Yes. I think that a smaller gap would have led to a more collegial parliament with more tendency towards consensus and compromise.
So really, what will be your expectations of this new parliament? You have witnessed the last parliament and it will dissolve. What are your expectations of the new parliament?
They will depend to some extent on the speaker who is chosen as well as the president. I think that if the two of them have a spirit of compromise and collaboration, we'll get a very productive parliament. And hopefully the parliament will hold its own members accountable for things like tardiness. And then maybe there will be more of a public spirit so that the parliament will not do things that undermine the public's confidence in how it does its business.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Arthur Kennedy, for your time, and we apologize for holding you for that long on the telephone. It's been great talking to you, sir. So, Dr. Park, you heard Dr. Arthur Kennedy's argument of the fact that when usually the gap between the minority and the majority is that huge, 30, it tends to be the case that majority who will have its way all the time against the minority. Is that a problem?
Well, it could be, but it would all depend also on the attitude of the minority. And I mean, it is going to have to work. But even before this election where the gap between the majority and the minority has extended for all intents and purposes, there were instances where, you know, the minority chose not to participate in certain matters that they felt they did not agree with. So yes, it can be an issue in terms of, you know, serving as a catalyst. But I think that it should still be possible for them to put away their partisan differences and rally together in the national interest. And that is exactly what I expect to see. And you see, I think that I must build on a point that Dr. Arthur Kennedy made. It would also depend on the Speaker and the President. And I already know that, you know, the President has expressed severally his willingness and interest in moving away from this, you know, winner-takes-all attitude. But he's talking about bringing groups together.
That also brings to mind, it just occurred to me that the President might be the first President of the Republic who has been a former Member of Parliament. Kwame Nkrumah was also a Member of Parliament.
Yes,
right? But
by and large, yeah. So that's the point. So he has all those advantages. He's been an MP, he's been a minister, you know, he's been a vice president, he's been a president. So I think that his very nature and the fact that, you know, the MPs sort of recognize, because it's almost like a school.
You're not expecting him to be shown a red card.
I don't expect them to do that. It would be very disappointing if they did. But the point I'm making is that his background in itself, as well as his own attitude of trying to build bridges and demonstrating in both word and act that he wants to try and break the gap and move us away from this winner-takes-all attitude. It puts him in a very good position then to be able to serve by himself as a catalyst. And I think that this would also reflect in who becomes the Speaker, because it has to be somebody that is going to work closely with the President and is going to be the lead in terms of bringing government business to the House. So I think I agree with Dr. Kennedy that it can be a problem, but I do not expect it to be, because of the type of president we have, which is going to influence the person who is going to end up being
Let's
Speaker.
digress a bit from Parliament. Do you expect John Mahama's leadership as president to be any different from what was offered by the late President John Mills?
Well, I wouldn't say different. It's just that the differences are also as a result of context and time. But in terms of their personas, their attitude towards issues, they have a lot in common. I mean, truly, it is very interesting, but I think that they have a lot in common. At least we are different to some extent, but we also have similarities. So in that sense, I mean, the issues of peace, of togetherness, of let's put our differences aside and talk about one nation, one people, we all belong, we don't have to destroy ourselves. These are things that
these are the same rhetoric of John Mills.
They share that in common. But the times and the context has changed. If you look at even the people who are going to constitute the parliament, they are not the same people that the late former president had. Yes, yeah. And, you know, the late former president won his presidency through a second round. He has not. So there are some practical reasons why a President John Dramani Mahama can never be exactly like a President John Evans Atta Mills. But we also agree that publicly, and those of us who had the chance to observe them, even from a distance, we acknowledge that they share some of the very same general, warm, likable tendencies that allows them to inure to people that even oppose them, either based on political ideology or otherwise. But people seem to always like them and believe that they mean well. And I expect that to carry through. But I wanted to make a quick point around the youthful nature and how it's also going to benefit us. It's the role of technology. And I think that we are going to benefit largely because most of the new members of parliament are people who are of the technological IT age. They have their iPad, they know how to check, so that if a loan comes, a proposal comes, they can do their research, they can find out and verify. And I think we are going to benefit collectively because they will know how to easily deploy technology to help ensure that the nation is not shortchanged by anybody at any time. And I think that in itself is going to be a plus. With the buildings and having assistants and researchers, all of that is definitely going to enhance and entrench our democracy.
Let's talk about coverage, media coverage of Parliament and communication from Parliament. Have you been impressed about media role in reporting Parliament and representing Parliament to the people?
Well, I think that if you look at the nature of our media landscape, I think that we can say generally that the media has done relatively well. But I would have wished that the coverage was much more sustained, you know, rather than just for news and, you know, sections of bills that seem to generate had a controversy largely. It seems to be where we see a lot more.
You seem to support the phenomena where you will have a dedicated channel solely for Parliament.
I think we should.
Will this make economic sense
I think it should.
In the private sector,
Look,
for example?
there is nothing much more important than informing the citizenry or allowing them to know what their representatives do on their behalf.
That will mean that you could see MPs sleeping as well.
Well, why not? You don't go to Parliament
doing
to sleep.
very, very shoddy debates.
If you want to have a nap, go in your office and have a nap and come back. If you are going to be in Parliament, you are there to conduct the people's business. I think that that in itself will serve as a check, so that the issue of punctuality that has been complained about, if, for example, we have this state broadcaster that they have in the U.S., public broadcaster, I should say, C-SPAN, focused on Parliament every day that Parliament is sitting, and even some important subcommittee sittings, that allows the citizenry to know what goes on. It allows the members of Parliament to also know that whether they are in the House or not, the way they conduct themselves would also be part of the public record. It also increases the level of debate. Well, you see, the parliamentarians are just humans like you and me. Their egos are at stake, and if they are aware that their activities are being seen 24 hours or at any time that they are sitting, as the Americans would say, they have to up their game. But it also serves as a tool for educating the rest of the population and will reduce the tendency of the citizenry and the constituents to make unnecessary demands on their members of Parliament, because they will be seeing them at work all the time, and therefore they will probably reduce the tendency of going to them and seeking school fees, which I don't think is bad, but you know, the role of a member of Parliament is not to pay school fees. You understand? Or to pay for weddings and
you think that the general population have not come to fully appreciate what their MPs do?
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. Our people haven't reached that stage yet. And that is where I believe that
that's problematic.
The National Commission for Civic Education, for example, they need to do a lot more. And I think that if we have this public broadcaster, you know, showcasing the proceedings regularly, I would say sustained, that in itself would help to educate the people. Because truly, I know members of Parliament, and you will be amazed about the types of requests that they get. You know, people still do not understand that the primary role of a legislator is to formulate policy, you know, to make the rules, to make law, to approve what becomes law. Our people don't understand that. They still think that once you are a member of Parliament, they should pay school fees and pay for adorings, you know, make donations at funerals. Not bad, but that is not the primary responsibilities of members of Parliament.
Dr. Clement Park, our time has run up, but I want to give you 1 minute to wrap up. What do you think Ghanaians should expect of this new Parliament? And moving on, how should we be revering members of Parliament or dealing with them?
Well, I think that we have every reason to be optimistic. Our democracy is growing. Our people are getting much more savvy. If you look at even the trend, you know, the fact that the president won at places where the candidates for his party lost and vice versa, it shows that our people are beginning to understand the way that the system should function. I expect the Parliament to acquit itself very well. Obviously, most of them are people who have taken the time to learn about the way an MP role should be, the way they should function before they present themselves. What that also means is that the rest of us are going to hold them to a higher threshold of expectation, and we will scrutinize them. And I think if we can do that, and if they will play their role, which we expect them to, you know, we should collectively benefit as a growing democracy.
And this should be good for our democracy.
Most certainly.
Dr. Clement Park, thank you very much for your time here. Dr. Park is convener of the Forum for Governance and Justice. We were also joined on the line by Dr. Arthur Kennedy, who is a leading member of the MPP and a medical doctor with the University of Cape Coast Medical School. My name is Stephen Enti, and thanks for making time with us.